Good evening and welcome to Normal Island. There are five of us who regularly produce these shows and do the hosting. I'm Cog, and I've obviously drawn the short straw because I'm covering us for the Labour Party conference, and specifically we're going to be looking at Keir Starmer's speech, zooming in on that. Acting as your host for this evening, and tonight we'll be looking specifically at highlights from Starmer's speech, the protester who was thrown out of Labour Party conference for heckling, Labour conference voting against the winter fuel cuts, and Mehdi Hasan's debate with Eylon Levy. And I'll be joined tonight by the wonderful champagne socialist himself, Harry. How are you doing tonight, Harry?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for that warm introduction. I really appreciate it. It's made my day.
I'm so glad. Something's got to, because we're going to be covering a lot of Keir Starmer talking.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Things are picking up politically, though, aren't they? I like that with conference season coming on, there's kind of more to talk about.
Oh, yeah, 100%. It's weird. You know, they come back from the summer recess. They do a couple of days in Parliament, and then before you know it, they're off to their respective cities to do their respective conferences. And then we get to see very normal people with very normal ideas, particularly the Conservative one, obviously with the Reform one that we had earlier as well. I mean, two convicted woman beaters within the first two guests for the Reform conference. But with Labour's conference, yeah, it was very interesting. Obviously, it's their first conference they've had since they become a government again after 14 years, and it's very much sort of them sort of being able to set the stage amidst the backdrop of various scandals regarding freebies.
Yeah, it's I guess this is why the show's called Normal Island. All of the things that have been going on.
I know. Yeah.
Yes. So don't forget, we want to hear from you, and we'll be responding to your comments. So please do put them into the chat. And with that, we will go on to our first story of the evening. It is said in Dante's 12th century poem Inferno that hell has 9 circles, which gradually increase the severity of punishment for the deadly sins committed the deeper you go. Even Satan, however, would conclude that making someone sit through an hour-long Keir Starmer speech was too cruel of a punishment for the 9th circle of hell. As such, we've taken some highlights. Firstly, here is Keir Starmer listing his big, bold achievements in government so far.
But conference, make no mistake. The work of change has begun. The patient, calm, determined era of politics as service has begun. Planning reformed, doctors back in theatre, new solar projects, new offshore wind projects, the onshore ban lifted, Great British Energy launched, one-word Ofsted judgments ended, a border security command, a national wealth fund, getting Britain building again, the Renters Reform Bill, stopping no-fault evictions, and the Railway Services Bill, bringing railways back into public ownership.
I feel like when you're highlighting one word Ofsted inspections, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel a bit. I feel like that was something that Principal Skinner would have highlighted if you brought him into the real world. But it wasn't the worst. Keir Starmer also made note of the challenges that they're facing, which led to this now infamous moment.
Technology, climate change, the ageing population, the movement of people. This is a time when great forces demand a decisive government prepared to face the future. We can see that again in the Middle East today. So I call again for restraint and de-escalation at the border between Lebanon and Israel. Again, all parties to pull back from the brink. I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Sorry for the cap cut edit there. We'll discuss his takes on international affairs more broadly in a bit, but first I should highlight that there were a few positives that I genuinely see as positives. Firstly, it was good to see like a genuine desire to solve homelessness and bring it forward as an issue, the way that it just hasn't been at the forefront of our government for the past 14 years, particularly among veterans and vulnerable people.
Because there is another injustice hiding in plain sight in our streets, in every town and city in this country. People who were prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice for our nation, who put their lives on the line to protect all of us, but who will not have a safe place to sleep tonight. We cannot stand by and let this happen anymore. So today I can announce that this government will respect that service. We will repay those who served us and house all veterans in housing need. Homes will be there for heroes. Thank you. And because we've started the hard yards of planning reform, because we're facing up to decisions ignored for years, because we're introducing new planning passports that will turbocharge house building in our inner cities, we can make the very same promise to other people at risk of homelessness. Young care leavers, victims of domestic abuse. They will have the security they deserve. They will have a roof over their head because Britain belongs to them.
I do have to wonder if that extends to young trans people who his government have continued to endanger, scapegoat and medically neglect. It would be nice if homelessness itself was eliminated, which we could do, but politicians consistently choose not to. Nonetheless, even having it talked about is welcome, as is the suggestion of a duty of candor for public services.
Because that's when I promised, or on this stage, that if I ever had the privilege to serve our country as Prime Minister, one of my first acts would be to bring in a Hillsborough law, a duty of candour. A law for Liverpool, a law for the 97, a law that people shouldn't have had to fight so hard to get, that will be delivered by this Labour government. It's also a law for the sub-postmasters in the Horizon scandal, the victims of infected blood, Windrush, Grenfell Tower, and all the countless injustices over the years suffered by working people at the hands of those who were supposed to serve them. Truth and justice concealed behind the closed ranks of the state. And Conference, this is the meaning of Clause 1. Because today I can confirm that the duty of candour will apply to public authorities and public servants. The bill will include criminal sanctions, and that the Hillsborough law will be introduced to Parliament before the next anniversary in April.
For those who don't know, candour is essentially institutional transparency when things go wrong, and I agree with this, as it could help us address some underlying issues of incentive which were responsible for a lot of the crises he mentioned. It's a welcome, if relatively small step, and in some cases highly hypocritical, but we can kind of go into that. But still, before we go on to other points from Keir Starmer's speech, Harry, what do you make of the clip so far? I'm kind of under the impression that a lot of his speech was pretty empty, so I'm interested to hear what your read on it is.
Yeah, I mean, so I watched it in its entirety live.
I'm sorry.
In my house. And yeah, I mean, it was an interesting one. It's his first speech at Labour Party conference as the Prime Minister, and again, against the backdrop of various scandals involving himself regarding freebies. And so obviously he wants to sort of change the narrative that's going on. So to talk about installing more trust in public services with this candour bill, I think is quite interesting. What else was there that sort of stood out to me? That was sort of one of the main ones in particular. Obviously, some other stuff that went on as well. The slip up with release the sausages was quite obviously the one that a lot of people have been drawn attention to. I mean, if there's one thing you don't want to reference Israeli hostages as is a pork product for sure. I think out of all the things he could think of, where could I slip up in this speech? That was probably the one bit he didn't want to mess up. But it's a little slip up, and it shouldn't detract from the rest of the other things that he was saying. What did you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to go into there, but with regards to the sausages comment, because we'll just start with that because it's a bit ridiculous. I do think that there are more parallels between Liz Truss and Keir Starmer than people are willing to admit. The kind of
Really?
the kind of like inability to talk to people like a human. The obsession with pork products and the gaff surrounding pork products, opening new pork markets.
Yeah, I don't know if Keir Starmer's one was that sort of deliberate. I don't know whether he was doing it when he was with a speechwriter, like, what'd be really funny here if I made a joke, like, if I slipped up here and then had like my face blasted all over social media with release the sausages and then Star Wars font coming through. I think it's definitely sort of an interesting time for him as well.
I don't think Liz Truss also planned her one out either. So I think
I think she genuinely thought this comes across really well. I'm opening up pork markets. It's like no one cares, Liz, but I reckon that's going to haunt you in a few years when you try and become our prime minister. But also the growth of that explanation. Well, how will we solve economic problems? Well, we'll press the magic growth button. That magic. Yeah, I mean, growth is another thing that Keir Starmer keeps mentioning. We always hear from Rachel Reeves, for example, we're going to grow the economy, we're going to grow this, we're going to grow that, but they never explain how. And I think it's it comes sort of back to the 3-word slogans when Keir Starmer talks about wanting to defeat the poison that is populism. Whilst in the same breath announcing fresh attacks on welfare claimants. It's quite an interesting it's very much like sort of a juxtaposition. But yeah, going back to this whole growth thing, I think it's definitely like how do they actually do it? Because from what we can see, they have no real ambition to try and achieve that. Every thing they're trying to fund, they're making cuts in other places. So we're going one step forward, but 2 steps back at the same time.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that because I was listening to the economist Richard Murphy give his review of of Starmer's speech, and he was essentially saying there's not any ideas that will create the kind of growth that he's talking about that will lead to this kind of national renewal, because a lot of those goals you can't achieve without some sort of wealth tax, some sort of like redistribution of wealth that's way too radical for like the Starmer wing.
Well, it was interesting that when with sort of like this idea of renewal, when Starmer talks about GB Energy. GB Energy is a PFI, private finance initiative, that is essentially going to be funded by taxing oil and gas giants and then putting that funding basically back in. So essentially it's coming out of one pocket and back into another. And again, GB Energy won't actually produce any energy. So it's an energy company that doesn't produce any energy. So I fail to see how it's actually an energy company in the first place. Mm-hmm. I think with GB Energy, again, the whole thing is just like, it's a soundbite. It sounds really good, especially at a time when people are facing really high bills. And then obviously we've seen that the price cap has gone up as well, courtesy of Ofgem, in order to allow energy companies to make a profit. 966 million, I believe, British Gas made last year. Do they need to make any more? It's absolutely obscene. But maximizing shareholder value is what makes the world go round. So the sooner we all accept that, the better we can all get on along in our lives.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up GB Energy because I was thinking the same thing about the National Wealth Fund. It's essentially a PFI. Like that's pretty much what it is.
I was at Labour Party conference in 2022 when GB Energy got announced, and all of this stuff has been readily available for people to read. Granted, most of us, including myself, probably haven't really looked at the fine print until about 2023, sort of around the time of the election as well in 2024. And it feels like no one was really pulling them up on that. Obviously, they're setting it up in Aberdeen, which I believe is currently held by the SNP. Which I think was probably more a kick at the SNP rather than like we're doing this for the people of Scotland.
Yeah, almost certainly. It's other things that I heard mentioned there that I can think of off the top of my head. The Renters Reform Bill, I remember that being in there, which is at the end of the day a Tory policy. Like it was one of the better Tory policies, but at the same time, if you're not doing more than the Tories were promising to do, then the Tories may never have actually pushed that through. Fair enough, that's an argument. I accept that argument. But if the only thing you're willing to do is what the Tories were willing to say that they were willing to do. And yeah, I think that's a problem.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of been Labour's whole sort of shtick since 2019. You know, oh, well, we can't commit this because we'll get slated in the media and by the Tories. And it's like, well, if your entire policy platform is based on what your opponents deem acceptable, you might as well join your opponents because you're never going to get anywhere. Yeah, renters reform is obviously very much needed. You know, when there's when those of us who are renting, who are paying upwards of £1,000 a month on rent, it's absolutely absurd. It's quite interesting that people from my generation can't get a mortgage for £700 a month, but we're deemed more than but yet we can pay upwards of sort of £900,000 a month in rent. It seems absolutely absurd. What I would like to see in terms of reforms regarding renting is sort of end to policies like right to buy, which has completely destroyed housing stock in this country. Obviously, home ownership is a good thing, but until we actually have enough homes for people to own, it's a completely redundant thing. Where I live in Milton Keynes, for example, 71% of the rented properties in my area are former right to buy homes. It's not sustainable at all. And again, landlords are raking in massive amounts of money to the detriment of their tenants.
Yeah, Keir Starmer keeps bringing up planning reform, but his approach of planning reform is essentially we reform some of the planning laws in the hope that the private sector will do the building that it just has no incentive to do because it makes so much money off of the lack of property. Like the lack of available property in this country is part of the reason. It's not the entire reason, because it's not that the properties don't exist. It's that they're owned by very, very few people. There was a study that came out like years ago now from Shelter saying that there are 10 empty houses for every homeless family in this country, and it's just because it's more profitable to keep houses empty. You know, it's
Well, speaking of homelessness, I think again to hear that Starmer's committing to housing veterans, regardless of what people think about the various wars that this country has been in over the years, and I know there's some very strong opinions, and rightly so. We shouldn't take away from the fact that people have given their lives, have put their lives on the line for this country, and they should be honoured in some way. And I think the fact that we have homeless people on the streets anyway is an absolute is a scandal. Having one homeless person, but then to have homeless veterans as well is awful. And again, I think when particularly in the conversations around asylum seekers being housed in hotels. The buildings cease to be hotels once they become asylum seeker accommodation. But one of the things you mainly hear, particularly from the right, is we have all these homeless veterans on the streets. Why aren't those people getting housed? And 100% they should be getting housed as well, but not to the detriment of other people. So it's good to see that we have maybe the government from this angle is actually committed to helping homeless people for sure.
Yeah, I think a general commitment to ending homelessness, which has just shot up under the Tories, and it's made things really difficult in town centres near where I live. I don't know what it's like near where you are, but like,
I mean, Milton Keynes used to get known as Tent City. I remember, you travel in and you'd see tents underneath the underpasses. You'd see them everywhere, but thankfully the local authority really sort of got their act together and managed to bring down homelessness in Milton Keynes. And it's not the fact that it's you don't. Maybe that people might say, oh, it's not nice to look at. Well, it's not nice to experience. And so it was good to see local authorities really being hands-on. I know people that worked in the police force that were part of teams trying to help homeless people. So, they've proven that it can be done in Milton Keynes, and it should be rolled out everywhere, in my opinion.
There's a story of George Bernard Shaw when he was applying to become an MP for the first time. And one of his suggestions was that there should be no more houses built without baths in them. That was, his line. He should said like, no more of the houses should be built without a bath, without running water. And he got replies from various Tory politicians at the time going, "You can't give poor people baths; they won't know what to do with them. They'll just
when was
in
this?
them, This is 1800s. This is
right. Okay, yeah.
This is like.
I mean, you could tell me it was last year, and I go, "Oh yeah, fair enough." It's...
And they and obviously that was their response, and he said, "No, I don't. You mistake me. I don't want them to have baths for their sake. I want them to have baths for my sake." And I think there's sort of like that mutual self-interest in all people in the community being looked after that little bit better that's kind of like addressed in that little.
Yeah, well, I
little
mean,
anecdote.
it costs a lot more to have homeless people than it does to have no homeless people. If you think about the amount of cost that it's going to be, I mean, and I hate how it always comes back to monetary value. Again, if you have homeless people on the street, inevitably they're going to need healthcare. If you're being exposed to the elements without proper protections, you're going to need support. And ultimately, it costs far less to actually house people and treat people like human beings than it does to have them on the street as a sort of a benchmark to show people going, oh, you think you're struggling? Look, you could be that person. And ultimately, that is why homelessness exists.
Yeah, you're right. It's a political choice. It really is.
100%.
In amongst
I mean,
the other,
Finland ended their homelessness. I don't see why we can't do the same.
yeah. I mean, effectively, we did during the pandemic for a little bit, but then.
Oh yeah, I mean, we proved that we could. We proved that we could do it. But again, it's a political choice in order to keep people homeless.
Yeah. It's the you can always fall lower type thing.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Great British Rail, though. I'm just thinking of other crappy Starmer policies that I heard while I was listening
Crappy
to that.
Starmer policies. I've never seen those words put together before.
Yeah, no, they're very rarely put together. So Great British Rail. While it's true that the train operating companies are nationalised, we'd still be renting the trains from the rolling stock and freight companies. So there's still like massive private influence involved in that. It's the same problem that exists with Medicare for All in the US. You're still like, yeah, you've got like a state vehicle to kind of like act as a middleman, but you're still buying or renting from private companies.
Another thing that should also be noted with Great British Railways is that the various railway lines will only be renationalised once that the private companies' contracts have expired. So some of them will be happening soon, within the next couple of years, but some of them go onwards of sort of around 2032. Given how Labour are at the moment, are they going to be in? I mean, the next election will be in 2029. Will Labour be able to see that happen? And ultimately, when another government comes in, are they going to reverse that? I mean, I would argue that all public services should be in the hands of the state, because ultimately it should be run for the good of the people. We've seen consistently with the railways and with most public services that have become privatized, they're around for the benefit of the shareholders. Ultimately, we are the consumers, and our concerns aren't really valued because they have a monopoly on the area. Avanti West Coast is a prime example. The reason they keep winning government contracts is because they're the only operator in that vicinity. The whole idea that privatization creates competition is kind of redundant, evident by the state of our railways.
Yeah, I want to go on and just look at an aspect of Keir Starmer's speech, which I think deserves some closer attention, if you don't mind. As Absolutely. I predict, it will only become more significant in the next few years, this particular issue.
I have always accepted that concerns about immigration are legitimate. It is, as point of fact, the policy of this government to reduce both net migration and our economic dependency upon it. I have never thought we should be relaxed about some sectors importing labour, when there are millions of young people, ambitious and highly talented, who are desperate to work and contribute to their community. And trust me, there are plenty of examples of apprenticeship starts going down at the very same time that visa application for the same skills are going up. So we will get tough on this. At conference, whatever anyone thinks about immigration, I will never accept the argument made not just by the usual suspects, but by people who should have known better, who said that millions of people concerned about immigration are one and the same thing as the people who smashed up businesses, who targeted mosques, attempted to burn refugees, scrawled racist graffiti over walls, Nazi salutes at the cenotaph, attacked NHS nurses, and told people with different coloured skin, people who contribute here, people who grew up here, that they should go home. No.
Now, I don't disagree with the fundamental point that he's making there. You can have concerns about immigration without necessarily being aligned with the EDL. The problem that I have is that he is once again setting up a trap for himself by framing immigration as a net negative that needs to be reduced constantly. Starmer said it himself earlier in the same speech. We have an aging population in this country, which is going to lead to a care, taxation, and growth crisis if we don't address it. We need immigration in this country. Like, just from an economic perspective, the IMF have warned us that high immigration helped to stop inflation becoming even worse. Immigrants are also just net contributors in terms of taxation and services. It's roughly £2,000 per year per immigrant that they contribute more than they take out in tax and services. But this isn't even necessarily about the truth of the statement. It's about how strategically incompetent it is. So Nigel Farage is looking to exploit immigration to build a path to increasing his own personal power in 2029, and Keir Starmer is just gifting it to him. The message Keir Starmer has is immigration is bad and must be brought down. Starmer can't bring immigration down because it would hurt us economically and demographically, and even if he could, Nigel Farage would always be willing to bring it down lower. You won't out UKIP, as I used to say back in the old days. And when he doesn't manage to reduce net migration, Farage will use it as a rallying cry. You told us immigration was bad, but you haven't reduced it, Mr. Starmer. Why haven't you reduced it? Explain to the people of Clacton why immigration has gone up. Harry, jump in here. Am I being too harsh on Starmer? I'd like to be wrong about this, to be honest.
I think Starmer is trying to, surprisingly, sit on a fence that ultimately wants to either go one way or the other, and he can't balance on it. Yes, I mean, immigration is a net positive. I mean, I myself, the son of an immigrant, it's going to be very difficult to hear me talking shit about immigrants. So actually, maybe sometimes. But what I would say is, I think the fact that he referenced the riots that went on over the summer, I mean, it was absolutely awful. And all of the things that he mentioned 100% happened, and we saw it with our very eyes. But that didn't just happen overnight. That built up, decades of scapegoating immigrants, asylum seekers, Muslims in particular. That's what led to it. I mean, the fact that the rumor that was started about these alleged, about the alleged name of the Southport killer being Ali al-Shakti, which if you translate from Arabic to English means I need to go to my apartment. That should have told you that it was all bullshit. But that it carried on and it spread to leading to what we saw. I think again, as you rightly said, I mean, in order to get people back on side, and you need to improve people's living standards, because at the same time as we're seeing living standards we have the lowest living standards on record since they began in the 1950s. People don't feel well off. And ultimately, if you can make people feel better, that will improve people's. Let me start again. In times of economic hardship, people seek the radical because they feel the status quo is not working. So they either, maybe in the context of Greece, for example, may shift towards the left. In around Europe, a lot we're seeing this quite common in Europe, Netherlands, Germany, France as well. Surges for the far right is going up, and in the UK, I'd say we're about a couple parliamentary terms behind, but I imagine that we will see it soon. The reform vote is probably a good example of that. 4 million votes, five MPs. That didn't just happen overnight. That's been building, and ultimately, politicians have. If you want to run this country, you have to be seen to be tough on immigration. It's almost impossible now to be kind of actually, you know what, immigration's all right, because I go, fuck you. You're not doing this anymore, and so Starmer is trying to balance that. It's trying to sort of balance on that fence. The thing is, if they go hard on immigration, Farage, the Tories, they will go harder, and ultimately Starmer, in his mind, will have a limit. And then once he's found it, it's going to get to the point where the people he's trying to court are like, no, you haven't gone far enough for me. But the people that he's trying to retain, and be like, well, hang on, you've gone so far this way. I don't feel like I can support you anymore. And so kind of drags Labour into a position where, perhaps they can't go back from.
It's like a fork in chess, isn't it? Or the word dilemma, di is two, lemma means horns. So it's the two horns of the bull. Whichever way you go, you're going to get stuck on one of the horns.
Yeah, I mean, we've always kind of said it. I feel like in this country, we do have like this big dial that says like anti-immigrant rhetoric, and we sort of like politicians take it in turns, sort of turning it and looking towards the audience, us, the electorate, going, is that far enough? Is that far enough? Maybe a little bit more. It's almost like with cooking. A good example, a good analogy would be like with cooking, right? You can always add ingredients, but you can't subtract them. And so I feel like with particularly talking about immigration, it's such a volatile topic in this country. I've had conversations with people in the aftermath of the riots, and one of the things that keeps coming up is, oh, we need a proper debate about immigration. It's like, but that's all we discuss. Literally all we discuss. Can you name an election where immigration hasn't come up?
Yes.
And it's
what's
such
the
a
other
volatile.
phrase? The other phrase that always gets brought up. It's something like you're not allowed to talk about immigration. We can't.
Told by people who are on a panel show invited to talk about immigration.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you think's going on? You know, it is completely insane. And again, I think if Labour is serious about improving workers' rights, about increasing wages across the public sector and minimum wage in general, building houses, making sure that everyone can get on the housing ladder, just improving people's lives, then people will no longer perhaps be as vulnerable to the radical than they would be at the moment.
Yeah,
that's what I hope. But ultimately, who knows? It's quite difficult to sort of uncondition yourself from those sort of views.
it is.
But then also, I think what we need to remember is that there is support amongst the middle classes as well. As I think as they start feeling like they're getting sort of hit. It's chat are just arguing amongst each other, so not great comments.
Yeah. I do think Starmer's setting up a situation where he is and I think unknowingly setting up a situation where he's going to get skewered on one of the horns of that dilemma. He's economic ruin or political ruin for him, because if he reduces net migration, good, he succeeded at that. But there's economic ruin at the end of that path. If he doesn't reduce net migration, it's political ruin for him. He's making a rod for his own back by sort of framing migration as this constant negative.
When he talks about visa applications for certain jobs going up, and then amongst people born in this country, they're going down, I think he has to look as to why people born in this country don't want to do those jobs. And ultimately, a lot of it will revolve around pay and other terms and conditions. If you improve those, you'll make those jobs more attractive. The care sector is a prime example. When we need more carers in a time where there's a massive care crisis in this country, a big part is making it more attractive. I understand why they don't give people like silly, insane wages, because ultimately you do run the risk of people only doing that job for the money. I know a lot of carers, and I know that they're good people, and they should 100% be paid more. But I guess maybe that's the risk they got going on in their head. It probably isn't, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. It's the inner liberal in me. People are
inner liberal. Suppress that, boy. Suppress that. Right. We're going to go on. I think this is obviously a big story, but we should divert a little to our next story, which is on Keir Starmer's speech again. I'm sorry, but this time it's about a protester. As Keir Starmer read out his speech, the citizens of Lebanon and Gaza were once again wondering whether their lives might be taken by Israeli attacks on civilian areas, using in part British-made weapons that we are still sending over there. Listening to Starmer's speech, one of the young delegates very much had his mind on those innocent civilians.
Every child, every person deserves to be respected for the contribution they make. My sister was I think this guy's obviously got a pass from the 2019 conference. We changed the party.
Don't you know the Labour Party has changed? They don't think genocide is bad anymore. Carla Denyer really was right when she said that Keir Starmer has just changed them into the Conservatives. It's the kind of like same crap that I would expect from the Conservatives, and I'm not talking like the Boris Johnsonite Conservatives necessarily. I'm just kind of talking about the Cameronite Conservatives. It's that callous indifference, that institutional indifference. And as well as this, our very own Callum here at Turn Left Media went down to ask some protesters who were outside the conference for their thoughts on Starmer's first few months. And we got some interesting responses.
I'm here to let Labour know that we don't support the cuts to pensioners. We don't support sending 600 million to Ukraine. That has nothing to do with us. It's just a quick money maker, which they could make that money by taxing the rich. Everybody knows it. Everybody's saying it. Tax the rich and you fix the 25 billion black hole.
Over 2 million people are displaced. Their homes completely bombed. And we know this didn't start on the 7th of October. It's been going on for 76 years. Palestinians have been getting slaughtered, not to the scale of this genocide. You know, the land has been getting stolen. There's been a blockade, water, electricity, things not getting through. And the wall, every step of the way for humanity, they will be getting affected, you know, before they were even getting killed.
We charge you with genocide! We charge you with genocide!
They've got to stop repeating things like, Israel has a right to defend itself, as though Palestine has got no right to defend itself. And they've got to follow international law. They're pretending to, but they're not. Israel has been breaking international law for decades. And because of the silence of countries like the UK and the US, they've grown into this monster who's being allowed to murder at will.
My view is are they Tory light, to be quite honest. I'm a Labour Party member, but I'm thinking of leaving the party.
Now, the Conservative government killed 230,000 badgers, and Labour in its manifesto said, well, the badger cull's ineffective, so we thought they'd stop. But did they? No, they've carried on with all the Conservatives' contracts to slaughter and shoot badgers at night. It's happening now. So I'm here to protest against that, because it is utterly wrong, unscientific. There is no evidence that badgers spread TB to cattle, which is why they're killing them.
The badger thing really took me by surprise the first time I watched that video.
I wasn't expecting that to come up.
Yeah, I don't think anyone was expecting that to come up at first. Not the first time I watched it, just now. Excuse me. After the protester who interrupted Starmer's speech, after, I shouldn't call him a protester really, because he was a delegate. After the delegate who interrupted Starmer's speech was hauled into a police van, the media were waiting outside to interview him as he emerged sometime later on.
What did you want to say to the Prime Minister?
I hadn't planned on saying anything. It's just when I heard him speak about how he wanted to ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon, just the hypocrisy on how every day we're still sending British bombs and British bullets that are being used in Lebanon and in Gaza right now. And the Prime Minister, he could stop that. He could stop that right now, but he doesn't. And he says that he wants things to stop, but he won't lift a finger to actually stop them.
So you weren't planning on saying anything? You were just moved to say why you were speaking?
No, I was a delegate. I'm a Labour Party member. I hoped I'd be one for life, but I suspect not now. But just what's happened and just the complete failure of the Labour Party and Keir Starmer to address it, it's just completely sickening.
What more specifically do you want from them?
Complete suspension of arms sales to Israel, embargoes, sanctions, whatever it takes to stop this genocide that is currently occurring, not just empty platitudes, to conference halls full of people who support you.
Can I ask what your job is, or are you a student?
I'm a student.
You're a student.
Are you happy with Keir Starmer as Labour leader?
Absolutely not, no. Although it's not just him, it's the party more general and the wider political establishment for not being supportive of taking the action that is required in order to stop this genocide and actually stop the war like they claim they want to do.
Can you tell us what was going through your head as you were sat there, and what was the moment you decided to stand up and start talking?
I was just angry. I mean, myself, I guess, for not saying anything at the time. But again, like I say, just for him coming out to say that he wants a ceasefire, but not taking any of the actions that he could, not lifting a finger in order to do it. And I was just angry, and in the end I decided not to do it before the speech was over.
How many? Sorry, go on.
I don't know if you heard what Keir Starmer said back at you.
No.
He said you must have a pass from 2019, and they've changed the Labour Party. What do you make of
No,
that?
I joined in 2022 when he was leader. I thought he would be able to do what he said, to be a more moderate force that could win the election and still deliver change, but he hasn't delivered change. We've got the same.
I thought that was really interesting, that last part, where he reveals that he actually joined under Keir Starmer in 2022. He wasn't a Labour member before then. And I've got something a little in common with that, that delegate, as someone who gave Keir Starmer a chance. I actually voted for him in 2020. And it was the worst mistake I ever made in politics. I really regret it, and I apologize constantly to my friends who at the time were
I
like,
find myself doing the same thing.
yeah. Funnily enough, I was going to bring that up, Harry. I believe you were also very much open to working with him at the start, right? The three of us are all kind of disgusted by Starmer's actions in Gaza, of course, or lack of action on the Gaza issue. But this isn't like an inevitability, or it's because we just want the politics of protest. It's our response to things he said and done. You know what I mean? It's our response to it being awful.
I think because I've thought about, obviously, over the last sort of 4 years having voted for him when I became a member of the Labour Party in 2020. So around the time that this contest was going on, I think part of me maybe at that point was joining the party specifically to vote for Keir Starmer, which I find really insane now that me at the age of, I'd been 19 at the time, would do that. But ultimately, I think when with that chap that just spoke, he talks about the idea that he joined it because he saw the Labour Party as being a moderate force for good. Ultimately, I don't know if that's really going to happen. I think the comments, I think everyone kind of focused on the whole sausages gaffe, and I understand why, because it was funny, but that part of Starmer's speech in particular, the comment that he made, it absolutely disgusted me, because, you know, like somehow thinking that children don't deserve to lose their lives at the hands of a regime that is committing all manner of war crimes is somehow something to be sneered at, and that's somehow a Labour Party position of the past, which I think is more telling of Labour in its current iteration than it has been maybe back in 2019. I also think, again, it's another needless dig at Jeremy Corbyn. Clearly, Jeremy Corbyn is living in Keir Starmer's head rent-free. There's a reason that Labour threw so much money at the Islington North constituency during the election, because they wanted to humiliate Corbyn. Ultimately, Corbyn pulled through and was re-elected. So again, I think it's just like he just can't let it go. Another thing that really disgusted me about that was the fact that the audience applauded and they cheer. You're cheer. What are you cheering for? I know he's your leader, but you don't need to do that. I haven't been a member of the Labour Party for, I think, now maybe 4 months, maybe a little bit less time than that. I see stuff like that, and I think I don't regret leaving. There was part of me was thinking, should I go to? I didn't go to conference last year because I didn't book it in time, and there was part of me this year thinking, you know what, maybe I should go up because I know some people there. And then I thought, actually, you know what, I don't want to give these people any more of my money, because what am I doing it for? And it's deeply. I'm gonna call it weird, because that's like the politest thing that I can say. Like, it is deeply weird behavior, cheering, that sort of thing. And again, Labour keeps saying, Rachel Reeves in particular as well, talked about this idea of like, we're no longer a party of protest. Do you understand the history of the Labour Party and why it was formed? It was formed by trade unions coming together to give workers an elected voice in Parliament and fight for rights. The rights that people have won in this country came through protest. Therefore, if Labour is seen as a party of protest, that is a good thing. But ultimately, it's not really anymore, is it? I mean, the amount of donors that we've seen and the amount of vested interests within the Labour Party in recent years is evidence of that. When you look at corporations like the Premier League, for example, people like Lord Wahid Ali, the amount that he's donated to the Labour Party, the things that they've been donating as well. The fact that so many multimillionaires and other incredibly wealthy people felt more than happy to throw their support behind Labour kind of shows you that the party really has changed and ultimately isn't going to deliver the things that the Labour Party was founded on.
Yeah, I do think I think quite when I saw him being dragged out, I did think of David Lammy saying that that unfortunately, due to like potential violations of international law, they were just going to have to stop sending certain arms to Israel. And it's just like the difference in the way that these things are framed, the way that people are treated, the way that
well, it's how they use words like unfortunately. Like, why is it unfortunate that you're no longer arming a regime that's massacring children?
Yes,
you know,
and either it is or it isn't, you know?
And it's like, there's nothing unfortunate about it. And I know they suspended some arms sales, but I think the way they did it, again, it's another fence-sitting exercise. They suspended, what, 10, 20% of the arms sales?
I don't think it was even that high, yeah.
So they suspend that, and ultimately the people who think that we should fully suspend arms sales to Israel, like myself, are going to go, well, that's not enough. And then the people who think that we should retain armed sales are going to go, well, hang on, why have you started doing it? And it's going to put more of a rod in his back. You know, piss or get off the pot, really. Which I don't know if that's like but you know, that is ultimately what Labour needs to do. And again, when it was revealed that David Cameron was basically sitting on legal advice that said we should not be sending weapons to Israel, I hope to see him someday in the dock at Den Haag, but I don't hold my breath.
Yeah. We should move on to our next story. If you want to know more about the Gaza situation as well as the situation in Lebanon, I believe it is being covered in our Friday show. So if you want to get more info on that, that should be coming around on Friday. With that, let's move on to our next story. Among Labour's least popular policies since coming to power is the move to means test the winter fuel payment to cut back on the number of pensioners who receive the support. Just as it comes to autumn, this is not only a moral but also a strategic disaster waiting to happen for the Labour Party. Many people who would naturally be sympathetic and willing to give the new government good grace have older relatives who will struggle when this cut goes through. Even if they are eligible, the process for claiming involves printing and filling out this daunting 243-page application form. A great many pensioners in poverty are isolated from their local community and won't have the support, internet access, or tech literacy to print out and fill out this form. The obvious cruelty of this policy didn't deter the Labour leadership, however, who have refused to commit to a wealth tax that they could have easily implemented instead and saved the pensioners the trouble of going through this horrendous form. At conference, however, the unions were having none of it and put forward a motion to abandon this cruel and pointless policy. And the unions won the vote. The Guardian reports Sharon Graham, the General Secretary of Unite, opened the debate, criticising Keir Starmer for removing the allowance while leaving the super rich untouched. Speaking to loud applause, she told delegates, "Our public services and British industry need investment now. It's no good having sympathy for workers at Grangemouth losing their jobs. They don't need pity. They need Labour to step up to the plate and not allow a billionaire who buys a football club as a hobby to throw those workers on the scrap heap." She added, "We are the 6th richest economy in the world. We have the money. Britain needs investment, not austerity Mark II. We won't get any gold badge for shaving peanuts off our debt. It's the wrong decision and it needs to be reversed." I suspect that Starmer will ignore this vote. I think he's got very little respect for democracy. We know that he's trying to water down democracy in the Labour Party more generally, but I really don't know what will happen. Harry, I'm interested in your thoughts on this one.
So yeah, I mean, so that vote was a non-binding vote. For those who are listening who are not sure what that means, it means that Labour don't really need to do anything about it. It's basically just like a how do we feel about this? Let's have a show of hands, which is quite literally how that vote was decided. I think the unions need to put their money where their mouth is. I think the unions should be withdrawing their funding from the Labour Party because it's very clear that Labour do not give a monkeys about what the unions think. And ultimately, money is what talks. We know that. We've seen it throughout the various scandals that have been going on with this party. And I think Sharon Graham is justifiably very angry, but I feel like she needs to withdraw Unite's funding, because what is the point? Labour's not listening to you. They don't care. They'll happily take your funding and your support, but they won't listen to what you're saying. And it's not her that's just saying this. All the other union leaders are saying this. Dave Ward, Mick Lynch, you name them, they're saying it. It's a very unpopular decision. And they frame Labour's whole thing is we're not afraid to make the tough decisions. How is it a tough decision to take money from pensioners? I mean, I can understand from the Conservative angle for sure, even though in 2017 the Conservative Party wanted to potentially cut winter fuel allowance. And Labour's own review into the policy said it could take the lives of 4,000 pensioners. Now, I mean, we're currently in September, and it's already feeling very cold in the evenings. So you can only imagine what it's going to be like in November, December, when those payments would come through. You know, if one person ends up getting hospitalised by it, it's a scandal. If one person loses their life over this as a result of not receiving that payment, who knows what's going to happen? But ultimately, again, kind of circling back to the main point I was making, I think the unions need to withdraw their funding in order to really hammer it home that this policy is so unpopular, and everyone thinks so.
Yeah, there's an effect that often happens in authoritarian regimes where people get surrounded by yes men. It's the isolation of the dictator. Not saying Starmer is a dictator necessarily. I'm saying that the thinking inside the leadership needs a bit of pushback. Like even from a point of view of like, we're your friends trying to help you out. You don't want to be surrounded by yes men, because this is bad strategy. Like the Labour Party obviously is trying to imitate the way that the Tories are like, harsh to voting blocs who disagree with them. The problem is that pensioners are a very powerful voting bloc in this country. They vote consistently. They have political representation, and they have media representation as well. And that's really come through for the Labour Party.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, sometimes I am of the opinion if you're pissing off the pensioners, perhaps you're doing a good thing, particularly when it comes to house building. With this time round, I mean, like, everyone's got older relatives, and even if they're no longer alive, you remember you remember them, and you think of them fondly. Yes, this current generation of pensioners have had it quite good in this country. They've got houses on the cheap. They didn't really have to. There were a few geopolitical issues going on, but they never really had to perhaps worry about. They didn't have 2 financial crashes in their lifetime. So I think we're kind of one. Sorry. So it's when they were younger. So I think, and kind of the response that I've seen from people sort of my own age that aren't really that asked about it, and I'm like, but why? Like, these are people at the end of the day, just because they've supported a political party that has inflicted some devastating cuts, particularly towards disabled people, other vulnerable persons, doesn't mean that they should be subject to the same treatment. Eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. It's not an effective policy platform. But I think when the payments do get cut, when the budget happens, I think we will start to see what people really think.
Yeah, and I do hope that those who are like sort of pushing towards that rhetoric of like, well, it's their turn now type thing, really do reconsider, because I hope that we can be kind of better than that. I really do hope that that we can, like, because every pensioner should have enough support and enough money.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing. So in a time where we've kind of seen at the moment with the various freebie scandals that are going on, you have somebody like Keir Starmer that deems a pensioner on £13,000 a year well off enough not to receive winter fuel allowance. Yet since 2019, he has received more than £100,000 worth of freebies, maybe slightly less. It's completely insane. Why does he need all this stuff, but pensioners don't need money to go towards their heating? Also, I mean, like, this is the thing. When people talk about means testing, they present it as a way of saving money. Means testing is always going to cost more, because the money you may save from not giving certain pensioners that money is going to have to be reinvested into hiring assessors who will have a financial incentive for where there will be incentives for them not to find people legible for winter fuel allowance. Ultimately, if pensioners are getting cold and they need support, they're going to go towards public services like the NHS, which is going to create more strain on them. So the money where you may be making some savings, you're going to be spending more in other areas. So you're not saving anything at all, and actually you'll be spending more as well.
It's a really good point, honestly. I want to quickly move on to some of the comments. I just want to say that if you like what we do, you can subscribe and share our content. There are now 5 of us contributing to Turn Left as producers and hosts. However, it is all still voluntary. In order for us to dedicate more time to Turn Left, to upgrade the quality, and to become a fully realised media organisation, you can now support us by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us with a one-off donation through the Patreon link that you can find there, or the through the Ko-Fi link that you can find there. I guess it's pronounced coffee link that you can find there, or longer-term support through Patreon. Now let's read through some comments that we've got.
I'm not looking forward to this. Anyone insults my hair, it's on site. I'm just letting you know.
Oh, awesome. Border Prince, you became a YouTube member. I think that might even have been before the show started. So that is extra cool. Thank you so much.
So cool.
Really appreciated. Yeah, what else have we got? And Luna Rose, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate you. Yeah, our YouTube members are just, they're the best. We have a really nice YouTube community here, and I'm really glad about it.
It's almost a rarity in this day and age, I must say.
Yeah, it is. It is. We're very lucky with our YouTube, our general YouTube community. It's been good. Yes. What else have we got? It's a rare comment from Aiden that I will agree with. Aiden's usually somebody I completely disagree with, but Free the Cumberland 6 has to be the. Yeah, that has to be a priority.
Is that like a niche joke? I don't get it.
Cumberland sausages, dude. They're like 6 sausages in a pack.
Oh, right, yeah. Okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I only get head sausages. I don't know this sort of stuff. Sorry. I'm not aware.
Sorry.
Really showing fucking hell, really showing my class, aren't I?
No, that's just boomer humor from me, I
That's
think.
embarrassing.
Yes, I follow
thank
this
you,
channel.
Anne. I really appreciate that. That's really kind. Thank you.
Yeah.
I hope you like what I've got to say. Oh.
James, thank you for gifting 5 Turn Left memberships. That's something you can do if those of you who those of you who support us, if you want to help us out, gifting memberships is a great way to do it. James, we appreciate it so much. That is absolutely fucking fantastic. Amazing. Good stuff. What else have we got on the comments lists?
Oh no, I wouldn't be having that. I wouldn't be having that.
I've had such a bad cold recently that my boyfriend has been referring to me as Keir Starmer.
You want to fight him. You want to fight him. Once you're well, just start sit-ups, 100 sit-ups a day, 100 press-ups a day, and then just reading the riot act. I wouldn't know. That's actually, if someone said that to me, I would cry.
That's a violation.
I would probably and I'd probably cry like Keir Starmer into my nice little suit that's been bought to me by Wahid Ali. But that's,
yes.
Yeah. No.
I saw
he was wearing a very nice suit, wasn't he? At that conference. I wonder whether he.
Sorry, Zeke de Blast also gifted 5 Turn Left memberships. We're doing very well. Thank you so much, guys. You're so generous. Sorry, mate. I was going to say, Mithril is a member for 6 months. I was just going to say before you move on, hold the comments for a second. I was going to say that. Did you see Wes Streeting doing that thing where he was like defending his he was defending Keir Starmer getting all these gifts by going, oh yeah, well he said something like they're donating to a good cause or something like that.
It's like, what is the good cause? What is the good cause in the room with us now? And so with the whole, I think he alluded to the idea of like when people donate to charities, and it's like, I donate to a few charities, and I donate to those causes because I believe in those causes. I want nothing in return. That's why I don't say what I donate or say where I donate to or how much I donate, because that's between myself. And ultimately there's a Islamic proverb that goes like, I'm paraphrasing here, but like the best act of charity is when the receiver doesn't know the identity of the giver. Ultimately, if I'm a very wealthy person and I'm donating to a political party, I want something in return. I may not reveal it straight away, but gradually along the line. I think the Premier League is probably a really good example, because a lot of the biggest £96,000 has been donated in the last year by the Premier League to various public officials for hospitality tickets to football, and also to Taylor Swift when she was playing at Wembley and at other stadiums as well. The reason the Premier League has been donating these very lavish gifts is because at the moment there is a bill going through Parliament called the Football Governance Bill, which aims to establish an independent football regulator that will be able to monitor the top 5 men's English leagues. The Premier League obviously doesn't want that. Richard Masters, the Premier League CEO, has come out very much against it. So the fact that we are seeing politicians accept such lavish gifts, and look, I like going to the football. I enjoy it very much. I was actually supposed to go tonight, but unfortunately I didn't because I couldn't get home. So it's very much like I understand it. And with these bribes in general, like the excuses that are coming out, like hearing that their big one now is like bringing up their kids. And you know what? Fair enough, right? People like doing nice things for their children. Okay, everyone wants to treat their children. I don't have any children that I'm aware of, so I wouldn't know. But people like to do nice things for their kids. At the same time, you have members of government that are admitting that they are using their position as an elected official to benefit their own children, whilst at the same time condemning other people's children to hardship by maintaining policies like the 2-child cap on welfare. So if you want to do right by your children, the very least you can do is do right by other people's children. And again, it's a really shit excuse. Like, why are you bringing your kids in? If one of my parents was an elected official and they were getting called out over this stuff and they brought me up, I feel like 50 Cent going, what is they fuck me for? Like, you know, that's how I would feel. And there's honestly like no, like Starmer today with using an £18 million penthouse as his son's revision place. You know, the room I'm in now is where I did my revision for my GCSEs. It served me just fine. Ultimately, obviously, none of my parents were going for elected office, or at least one of them not becoming the prime minister. You know, it's an absolutely insane thing. And also, when you look at the time frame of when it was declared, it exceeds the time when GCSEs finished. So, what was his son starting his A-level revision? Like, what was going on? Like, you know, it's at this point, it's just like, what do they do? And there is so much more about this flat in particular that is coming out. Some of it is coming from Guido Fawkes, so we should take it with a pinch of salt. But you know, we'll see how it goes. But let's make it clear: this scandal is not going away.
Yeah, and it makes him look so hypocritical. Yeah,
I know.
I should deal with the comments and the donations again. So Luna says, based Protestor. I fully agree. He was awesome. It'd be really good to have him on the show if we could.
Well, there was also the other chap as well who was manhandled out of Rachel Reeves' speech. You can actually see the security member like grab him by the throat as well, a bit like how you've been grabbed as well, Cog. You know, so it's the fact that sort of use of that sort of such excessive use of force was deployed kind of just shows you like what like the guy's posing no harm. And I was reading some comments of people who were there and they were like, well, you know, it was very unnerving. And it's like, oh, like being called out over supporting a genocide supporting party is difficult. Oh, bless you.
Yeah. Natalie says, I'm happy for both migration and immigration to this country as they help me run hospitality, and I'm happy to give them better wages as they contribute to community. Honestly, such a good attitude. Wish more people had it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so especially with like the hospitality sector has been massively hit by things like Brexit, and ultimately immigration was always going to go up as a result of leaving the European Union, because any trade deal that we struck with another country would inevitably require visas to be established for their citizens to come to the UK. Again, amongst like with small boat crossings, the reason that's gone up is because we're no longer part of the Dublin Agreement. When we were in that agreement, what it meant was we could say to states in that agreement, please hold fire on sending people over, because we're still processing applications. Now we're out of that agreement. That obligation is no longer there. The French have offered to set up a processing centre in Calais, but we've refused because we would rather, you know, we're cutting our noses off to spite our face. Look, I understand not liking the French sometimes. I'm sometimes in that camp, but, you know, it's sometimes good to work with people on certain things.
Yeah. What else have we got in terms of comments? Join the Greens. Good advice. Yep.
I'm tempted. I voted Green in the election. I've got I was sometimes like, oh, should I have voted that way? Because what if it like swings a different way? And actually I was like, you know what? Every single day, this government proves to me I made the right decision.
Yeah, same. Exactly the same.
It's like, I've literally like when I see all the news stories coming through, like especially around like this whole donor scandal, people going like, what? I thought they were different. It's like, what? Pardon?
What gave you that impression, mate?
Like, yeah. Come on, bro. Like, let's not all turn left, voted Green. Yeah. We all do.
Yes, yeah. For those who don't know, this is our producer just put that in our background chat. All of the turn left.
A lot of the independents as well. Like vote Green or independent. There's really no harm in doing it, and particularly with the next election. I mean, we don't know what the political landscape's going to be like by this time next week. Maybe we'll be doing a stream talking about Keir Starmer resigning over like dodgy stuff going on in this £18 million flat. Who knows? I haven't read any stories. You know, it's. He honestly knows. But
how are we doing for comments? They don't listen to their base, their members, their affiliated unions, or the public. It's insane that they can just do whatever they want with no democratic mandate. Yeah, no, I agree. Not a lot to say on that one, to be honest. Any more comments? How are we doing? The leadership of most unions need to wake up and smell the coffee. Labour needs to go the way of the old Liberal Party. I think there's some
Caesars, yeah. Well, I guess that's why they don't want to implement PR. I mean, this is one of the things. Like, this is what always really pissed me off about during the election, was seeing that sodding website like Stop the Tories Vote. And I looked on the website and I tried using it, and it kept telling me to vote Labour. And I tried other constituencies as well, and it told me to vote Labour. Now, obviously, I understand why it did that, because obviously the Labour Party in most constituencies had the biggest chance of unseating the Tories. However, when I looked at this website's demands, I was thinking, right, you're not going to get proportional representation because Keir Starmer doesn't want it. It doesn't serve the interest of the Labour Party. This idea of like, oh, we're going to lend you our votes, but then you have to earn it next time. It's like, well, in 2029, we could be looking at a fucking Nigel Farage majority with reform. So ultimately, like, Labour may have not even earned our votes if we're in that position. Why would I want to support this party? So it's it's a real dire state, and ultimately, like, my conscience is kind of clear. I would like to note that a lot of the usual suspects that you would see calling the Tories out over corruption with these various scandals are not as vocal as they would be. Ultimately, like, I've received comments getting abused. Like, I was called a Tory today. Me, someone who literally used to shout "fuck the Tories" in my uni, actually in this room, very much in this room. Or being a Farage supporter as well. I wear a T-shirt with him having a milkshake thrown on his face. That's something a supporter definitely does. But ultimately, it is like, fundamentally, it's about, like, if you have an idea of right and wrong, it doesn't matter who is falling into those categories. You can say it as it is. And if you think corruption is bad, then you don't look at the color of the rosette they're wearing. You look at their actions. And I think too much we're falling into that. We're falling into that category. Love his hair, curly's best. Curly hair is really good. It's an absolute bastard to maintain. I should probably wash it tonight because I've got uni tomorrow, so I should probably look presentable, or I end up wearing a bandana in my hair to cover it all up.
Oh mate, I was going to seminars looking like absolute. But
yeah, I'm no longer in uni accommodation, so I haven't got an excuse for looking like a sack of shit. And like I've gone out the night before, so it's I've got to look good now. 10 subs. Wow, from I'm not reading.
Wow, thank you, Phil. Jesus, 10 subs. Oh my god, gifted 10 turn left membership. Thank you so much for that. Honestly, Phil, that is absolutely fantastic. I don't know what it is with people tonight. People are really being generous with the subs.
Everyone's
generous kings in the chat.
Very generous. I appreciate that.
Definitely. And Natalie became a YouTube member. Thank you so much, Natalie. Really appreciate it. Honestly, it's so good. We've had so many members join tonight. I don't know what it is. Probably ragging on the Labour Party because everybody is feeling this kind of like,
honestly, like the Labour Party, generational hater now at this point.
Yeah.
But this is another point that I'm thinking of, because in my comments, what I'm seeing is people say, like, oh, this is proof that socialism isn't working, yada yada yada. There's nothing socialist about this Labour Party, and essentially what's going to happen is this party, this government is going to crash and burn. Maybe not next week, maybe not within the next month or year, but it's going to happen very much soon. They're going to have their asses absolutely handed to them. Yeah. And then basically, when sort of Labour talks again, it's like, well, we tried socialism. It's like, did we? Did we really?
Yeah.
Did we actually do it? Because I don't remember anything remotely socialist happening.
Yeah, that's going to be the frustrating thing, right?
Yeah. And it's going to, I don't want, it's like when people talk about with, that guy was a Labour councillor, I believe, so not a security guard, just an attack dog. Oh, wow.
Yeah, the guy who dragged the protester out was just a Labour councillor.
I hope he put garlic early on those boots that he was licking.
Thank you, Luna. Indeed, trans liberation now, fantastic slogan, and free Palestine, even better. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, not
that's
better,
another thing with West Streeting renewing the puberty blockers ban, even though the evidence shows that they're completely safe, but they're only being banned for trans people, not for cis people. Which makes complete, because surely if it's not safe for one group of people, it's not safe for another. But what do I know?
Yes, Andy Carter just became a member for 3 months. Thank you. That is incredibly generous, Andy. Really appreciate having you on board. We just have the most fantastic membership and gifted 5 turn left membership. Jesus. Okay. Was that it in terms of the comment section? That was it. I'm taking that as that was it. Superb. That was a very long conversation. Absolutely fantastic, though. Loads of gifted memberships. Love it. I do have to go on to our final story of the night. So, Eylon Levy is the former British-Israeli citizen who acted as Israel's spokesperson in the first half of Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. Levy is not an impressive figure and has become even less impressive since stepping down from his position. In contrast, Mehdi Hasan is the founder of Zeteo, a left-wing media organization like Turn Left, and has always been the far more principled of the two. Earlier this week, they met for a debate with Open to Debate, the hosting platform previously known as Intelligence Squared, if you've heard of it. And it's fair to say that Mehdi Hasan absolutely wiped the floor with Levy.
Proportionality is a difficult subject, and we shouldn't talk about this in abstract. X number here, Y number there. Let's talk specifics. The problem with a lot of spokespersons of Israel, they want to talk in abstract. I want to talk in specifics. So if we talk about proportionality, we talk about discrimination, we talk about war crimes. Last October, shortly after October 7th, Israeli forces struck a 3-story residential building in Gaza City. They killed 15 members of the Al-Dos family, 7 children. According to Amnesty International, the survivors say no warnings. Eylon told us there were warnings. No warnings were given to evacuate. Amnesty found no evidence of any military targets in the area, and Israel to this day has offered no explanation for that strike. So for the dead Al-Dos family members, Eylon, can you tell us why they were killed?
Mr. Hasan, the IDF does not owe you immediate answers, and the fact that Amnesty speaks...
We don't have to explain our actions. Like, I cut it off there because I feel like Eylon's first line of his response was probably enough. You can find the full debate on Zateo's YouTube if you really want to check it out. But Levy's responses were not very substantive. Eylon Levy's responses they didn't contain a lot of substance. This moment for me, though, was the absolute highlight because it showed the disconnect between Israelis and those who they wave away as human shields and collateral damage, if we want to play the clip.
I have a question for whoever wants to jump on it. Is Israel's war in Gaza making Israel more secure?
When this war began, Hamas had a fearsome missile arsenal that rained thousands of missiles on our cities. I had to keep running into a rocket shelter. Israel has now eliminated the threat of rocket fire from Gaza. It has cut off its smuggling routes. It has destroyed its missile silos, and it has destroyed Hamas's weapons capabilities. That alone has made us safer and makes it easier to sleep in our beds at night.
Three quick things. Number one, the Israelis went to Supreme Court recently, and they were having an argument in Israel's Supreme Court, and they put in the official filing that we do not control Gaza. Even after all this time, Hamas is still in control of lots of parts of Gaza. So they say the honest stuff when you're not looking. Number two, I interviewed Ami Eylon recently, former head of Shin Bet, former Israeli admiral. He said very explicitly, Israel will not be safe until we give Palestinians freedom. This is his words, not my words. And number three, I'm glad you had a bomb shelter to protect you because the Al-Dos family in Gaza did not have a bomb shelter to protect them.
I'm glad you had a bomb shelter to protect you because the Al-Dos family did not have a bomb shelter to protect them. I thought that was a really powerful moment from the debate and showed where the humanitarian sympathy really lies in this conflict. I talked to Zionists a fair bit, and it is getting increasingly difficult as they start to become more and more isolated and in denial. You know, the United Nations is out to get them. So is every human rights organization, doctor, witness on the ground, aid workers, Lebanese families, homes. There's just no end to what they'll excuse. Harry, I want to ask just briefly, we do have to be brief on the story, but what's your experience of talking with or listening to indeed Zionists attempting to justify Israel's actions?
Well, if you'd asked me this time last year, what do you think about what's going on between Israel and Palestine, I would have said to you, I don't know enough about it. It's not a subject I want to weigh in on. Leave it to other people. Now I'm very much of the opinion of, Israel needs to be stopped. That's as simple as that. And Palestinians deserve freedom. Listening to Eylon Levy talk about the destruction of various weapons that Hamas has, I hope it was worth it, considering how many casualties have happened. As I think 40,000 at the moment. It's possibly even more. It's been such a difficult thing. I mean, for me, seeing the footage and the photos, it's like every single day you see an image that's come out of Gaza or Rafah or somewhere else in Palestine of absolute of a major atrocity, and it doesn't matter who's been caught. Sometimes you can't even identify in the photo who has actually been who has been attacked, and you think that's awful. I'm never going to see anything as bad as that. The following day, you see an image that's even worse. In my comments, I've spoken to various people or tried to have a conversation with people, and it's just the denialism that they can't bring themselves to admit what's actually going on. And I fail to see how this keeps, because, obviously Israel has successfully been able to conflate Israeli identity with Jewish identity. this idea of how does it keep people safe? Because as far as I can see, hate crimes in this country towards Jewish people have shot up as a result of what's happened on October the 7th. How is that keeping themselves safe? How is the IOF conducting this murderous rampage keeping Jewish people safe? Because in this country, when we look at reported hate crime stats, that clearly isn't true. And I think the fact that people are giving Jewish people in this country racist abuse is absolutely disgusting. Like, why are you doing that? Makes absolutely no sense. They're not responsible for it. We wouldn't, any right-minded person wouldn't abuse a Muslim for the crimes of Daesh. Why should you attack a Jewish person for the crimes of the IOF? It makes absolutely no sense. But yeah, no, I think just in general, looking at all of everything that's been going on, I don't see how you can consider yourself to be a good person and not be on the side of peace and humanity, particularly towards the sufferings that the Palestinians are going through. Our politicians in this country, they go, well, we support a ceasefire. And again, how many Palestinian and Israeli lives had to be lost before you came to that conclusion? Because I'm old enough to remember Keir Starmer going on LBC with Nick Ferrari saying that Israel has the right to remove power and water from Gaza, which is collective punishment. That's a war crime. That guy's now in charge of our country. And yeah.
So many rabbis have criticized the way that this has been done, the way that the American war machine, imperialism, this pet genocide project in the Middle East that America has going on has been presented with a Jewish face, like they've used a Jewish face to cover for genocide, for ethnic cleansing, when it's got nothing to do with the Jewish people. And really, it's horrible to witness the like underlying anti-Semitism that Zionism brings with it. Not just, and I'm not talking necessarily about those who are reacting negatively to what's going on, even. I'm talking about the original crime, the conflation of Jewish people with Israel that Zionists do seem to want to commit. And it's so dangerous. But of course, keeping Jewish people safe around the world is not a goal of Likud and of the extreme parties within Israel. Because ultimately their whole thing with Zionism is wanting to get as many Jewish people out of those countries and into Israel. It's that's their stated goal. And yeah, no one gets an ethno state. No one gets an apartheid state. This is this conflict. I say conflict. This genocide is only going to get worse as it spreads through the Middle East. I'm sorry, Harry. I'm going to have to end it there.
No, that's absolutely fine.
Thank you. I appreciate you, and appreciate
thank you for having me on.
Yeah, that's all for tonight. I do want to thank everyone who tuned in, and thank you again, Harry, for joining me. You can find Harry under @ChampagneSocialist on various social media sites, including TikTok, and I do encourage you to check out his work. We will be hosting a debrief on Sunday as usual, with normal Ireland shows on our regular Monday, Wednesday, Friday pattern from there. And of course, we still have this week's Normal Ireland on Friday. I hope you all have a great week. Thank you, and we will see you next time.
Patreon.com/turnleftmedia. Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.